5 people went missing between 1945 and 1950 from the area that is now known as the Bennington Triangle. There seems to be nothing in common among those who vanished. The Bennington Triangle has long been known for strange events, including UFO activity, Bigfoot sightings, and strange lights and sounds. With no clues as to what happened to the 5 people who disappeared decades ago, many theories have arisen, involving paranormal activity, the work of aliens, or some other supernatural force. Welcome to Without a Trace. I'm your host, Jalyn. Every file holds a mystery. Every story deserves to be heard. This is the Bennington Triangle story. The Bennington Triangle is an area located in the southwestern corner of Vermont. It is notorious for being the site of numerous mysterious events. The triangle is roughly bounded by the towns of Glastonbury, Woodford, and Bennington, and covers an area of about 100 square miles. The Bennington Triangle is thought to be an area where the laws of reality are shifted and the veil between this world and the other is thin, allowing for the strange events that have occurred there. There have been reports of strange lights in the sky, strange creatures, and even a phantom hitchhiker, all of which have added to the allure of Bennington Triangle. One of the first reported events occurred in the early 1800s when a stagecoach full of passengers was forced to stop on a washed-out road. The driver first noticed huge footprints in the mud that were too large to be human. Then, the coach was attacked by a giant creature who knocked the vehicle on its side. The frightened passengers could only see a pair of eyes before the monster roared and ran into the forest. The creature was described as being a large, hairy, black creature standing over 6 feet tall. As far back as 1873, there have been reports of people going missing from the Bennington Triangle, including Carl Herrick, who disappeared while hunting with his cousin Henry, less than 10 miles northeast of Glastonbury Mountain in 1943. At some point, the pair became separated. Whether they decided to go separate ways or unintentionally became separated is unknown. Henry made his way back to camp, expecting Carl to already be there or be back shortly. However, Carl never returned. Once Henry realized something must have happened to Carl, a search began. A few days later, Carl's body was found. The autopsy determined the cause of death was squeezing as Carl's ribs had punctured his lung. Bear tracks were found near his body, but his injuries were not consistent with a bear attack. There is no way of knowing how long the bear tracks have been there. His gun was found nearby, but no bullets were discharged. This was an odd find as Carl was a hunter and he had means to defend himself. This incident is often overlooked in discussions about the Bennington disappearances because a body was found and a definitive cause of death was given. The most prominent disappearances include 5 unexplained vanishings that were reported to have taken place between 1945 and 1950 in the Bennington Triangle. While some attribute the disappearances to natural causes, others explore supernatural or paranormal explanations. The first disappearance occurred on November 12, 1945, when 75-year-old Mitty Rivers vanished while on a hunting trip in the Bennington Triangle. Mitty had been living in Bennington since the 1920s. Annie, his wife of nearly 46 years, passed away in 1936. The couple had 6 children together. Mitty was an experienced fisherman and hunter and was considered to be in good shape. He was a skilled outdoorsman who frequented his son-in-law's hunting cabin on the Long Trail and was well acquainted with the area. Around 4 p.m., he was leading a group of 4 hunters through an area called Hell Hollow in the southwestern area of Glastonbury Mountain, not far from the Long Trail. As the group was returning to the campsite, Mitty got a little bit ahead of the others. When the rest of the group arrived at the campsite, Mitty wasn't there. Hundreds of volunteers and members from the Vermont State Guard took part in an exhaustive 8-day search. The search party leader anticipated finding Mitty's remains, noting that numerous people have been lost in the region in the recent decades, but all had eventually been recovered. The search parties ventured out onto the long trail, but couldn't find a clue as to what could have happened to the experienced hunting guide. The only thing found during the search was a rifle cartridge of the same type that Mitty used. It was never confirmed if the cartridge belonged to Mitty. Even after this exhaustive search, many locals believed that the knowledgeable woodsman would be able to survive and would soon resurface in town. But he never did. The following spring, a hiker found Mitty's handkerchief along the trail south of his last known location. This is the only evidence to ever be discovered. A year later, on December 1st, 1946, Paula Walden disappeared. Of the 5 disappearances, Paula's is the most well-known. Paula was a sophomore at Bennington College. She was the oldest of 4 children of industrial engineer and architect William Weldon and his wife Jean. Paula was an average student, and her favorite subject was botany. After finishing her shift in the Bennington College dining hall, 18-year-old Paula Weldon returned to her dorm and quickly got dressed in walking clothes. Her clothing was adequate for the weather that afternoon, but not for the anticipated drop in temperature that evening. Paula then told her roommate she was going to take a walk and left her dorm around 2:45 p.m. She was looking to hitch a ride to the entrance of the long trail, but could only find a driver willing to take her as far as his home. It is presumed she walked the remaining 2.5 miles to the trailhead. Witnesses placed Paula at the trail around 4 p.m. At this point, the sun would have been going down, with the temperature starting to drop. The long trail is 272 miles long and runs the length of the state. It is the oldest long-distance trail in the United States, constructed between 1910 and 1930. Paula packed no bag, took no extra clothing, and did not take any extra money. From all appearances, she did not expect to be gone for more than a few hours. A group of hikers were walking down the trail as Paula was walking up. She approached them and asked a few questions about the trail, and they provided her with directions. She continued walking in a northerly direction. She was last seen on the trail by an elderly couple who were about 100 yards behind her. According to them, Paula turned a corner on the trail, and when they reached the same corner, she was nowhere in sight. Paula was last seen about 2 miles south of the area where Mitty vanished the previous year. Back at campus, Paula had not returned to her dorm. Her roommate thought she must have gone to the library to study for exams, but the next morning she still had not returned. Once the college was notified, they immediately started a search of the campus itself. It wasn't until one of the hikers she had approached recognized her photo in the Bennington Banner newspaper that the search became focused on the long trail. Before that, no one knew she had even left campus. 2 weeks of searching ensued, and a $5,000 reward was offered for her return. Bennington College closed for several days, and students and faculty volunteered and organized search efforts. Hundreds of volunteers, National Guard troops, and firefighters searched for Paula to no avail. Ground and air searches concentrated on the long trail and along Route 9, the road Paula took to get to the trailhead. Most assumed Paula had gotten lost in the woods, but when no clues were found as to her whereabouts, other theories started to be considered. At the time of Paula's disappearance, there was no state police organization in Vermont, and the county sheriff and the state's attorney were responsible for solving the disappearance. Paula's father pressed the governor to bring in additional professional law enforcement help, and as a result, Connecticut State Police Detective Robert Rundle and state policewoman Dorothy Scoville were assigned to the case. They interviewed every person who saw Paula and every person who lived along the route she took. Investigators discovered that one of the last people to see Paula alive was a lumberjack named Fred Goddett. Fred was in the midst of an argument with his girlfriend when Paula walked by. He stormed off in a jealous rage shortly thereafter, and depending on different statements he made, he went to his shack and spent the majority of the evening by himself, or he drove up a portion of the trail where Paula was heading. Reportedly, Fred told at least 2 people that he knew where Paula was buried, but later claimed it was just a joke. He had no solid alibi for the rest of the night, but no evidence was ever found, and this avenue of the investigation ended. The manner in which Paula's disappearance was handled by local law enforcement was criticized by several people, including Paula's father. It It is believed that the lack of a statewide law enforcement organization and the lack of training by local sheriffs contributed to a poorly run investigation. Within 7 months of Paula's disappearance, the Vermont legislature created the Vermont State Police. Of all those who went missing, Paula's disappearance drew the most media attention. 3 years to the day after Paula disappeared, 68-year-old James Tetford boarded a bus going from St. Albans, where he was visiting relatives, back to his home in Bennington. His relatives accompanied him to the local bus station and observed him boarding a bus going south. The last confirmed sighting of James was at a bus depot in Burlington, where he had a brief conversation with an acquaintance before transferring to a Bennington-bound bus around 6:15 p.m. When the bus made a final stop before Bennington, James was on board. The bus driver and the 14 other passengers testified that they had seen him sleeping in his seat, and the bus did not make any other stops before Bennington. When the bus arrived in Bennington, James was nowhere to be found. All of his belongings were still on the luggage rack, and a bus timetable lay open on his empty seat. James's disappearance went unreported for 1 week until the superintendent of the Bennington Soldiers' Retirement Home notified police on December 8th. Newspaper reports indicated that James was mentally ill at the time of his disappearance, and his family stated that he was despondent about returning to Bennington. Oddly, during the mid-1940s, when James returned home at the end of his second tour during World War II, he came home to find that his 28-year-old wife, Pearl, had vanished from their home. His family last saw her as she was heading to the store in Franklin, but she was never seen again. James quickly began to suffer from depression and moved into the Soldiers' Retirement Home in Bennington. The popular conception is that James vanished into thin air while on the bus, but in reality, there is a gap between when he was last seen and when he was reported missing. The bus driver later reported that a man resembling James may have disembarked in the village of Brandon, about 70 miles north of Bennington, while that same night, Brandon police investigated a report of a man fitting James's description acting weird. While no trace of him was ever found, there is enough evidence to suggest that James did not dematerialize while on the bus. At this point, a pattern was becoming evident. The missing people had all disappeared in the same vicinity during the same time of the year. On October 12, 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jepson disappeared from his mother's truck, where she left him while she fed some pigs. Paul was born on March 15, 1942, in Bennington County to parents Paul and Margaret. Around 3 p.m., his mother drove him to the Bennington town dump, where the family kept a herd of pigs. She left him unattended in the vehicle for about 30 minutes while she tended to the animals. When she returned around 4 p.m., Paul was missing. Hundreds of police and volunteers joined in the search for the boy. Authorities initially focused their search on the dump and surrounding woods, but a New Hampshire sheriff brought in a bloodhound who tracked the boy's scent as far as a nearby crossroad where the trail ended abruptly. Police theorized the rain may have washed away the scent, while Paul's father said he had talked about nothing other than the mountain in the week before he vanished, and his father believed it was the lure of the mountains that lured him away. Evidently, Paul went wandering off, and he has never been seen since that day. 16 days later, 53-year-old Frida Langer disappeared while hiking on October 28, 1950. A skilled hiker and hunter, Frida accompanied her husband Max and cousin Herbert that morning to a family cabin on the shores of Somerset Reservoir. Around 1:09 p.m., while hiking with Herbert, Frida slipped and fell into a stream, leaving her cold and wet. Frida told her cousin to wait there while she took a shortcut to the cabin to change, promising she'd be right back. After a short wait, when she failed to return, her cousin returned to the cabin where he learned that she never made it back. Authorities were immediately notified, and 300 searchers gathered to take part in the search for her. Over the next 2 weeks, 5 searches were conducted involving aircraft, helicopters, and ground search. After a few weeks without success, investigators decided to call off the search. Frida suffered from a seizure disorder, and her husband speculated that exposure to cold temperatures may have triggered a seizure, causing her to become disoriented and lost in the woods. On May 12, 1951, hunters found Frida's body 3.5 miles from where she was camping in an open field near the reservoir. The area where her body was found had been extensively searched previously. No cause of death could be determined because of the condition of her remains. Both Frida's cousin and her husband took polygraph tests and passed. The cause of Frida's death remains unknown. Frida was the last person to disappear and only one whose body was found. It's not likely we'll ever learn what happened to the 5 people who disappeared decades ago. And so, without any clear answers, many theories have arisen. One of the most popular theories surrounding the Bennington Triangle involves paranormal activity, with many believing the disappearances are the work of aliens or some other supernatural force. Other theories suggest the disappearances were caused by a secret government experiment or that the area is home to some kind of secret cult. Some theories have suggested the disappearances were caused by a time warp or an interdimensional portal. A more likely possibility is that the disappearances were caused by a combination of environmental factors, such as dense forests, rugged terrain, and the fact that the area is so remote. This could make it difficult for people to get help or even find their way out of the area. Another potential explanation could be that some of the disappearances were the result of animal attacks or other forms of violence. It's possible that the individuals were attacked by wild animals or even killed by other humans in the area. As the area is so remote and secluded, it's possible that these attacks and killings went unnoticed and unreported. There seems to be nothing in common among those who vanished. They represent both sexes and vary in age from 8 to 74. The only things in common in the disappearances are the time of year, early winter, and the time of day, late afternoon. Thank you for listening to Without a Trace with your host, Jolyn. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the Bennington Triangle. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and follow the podcast on social media. Join me next week as I dive into another case.